All right, and let me say again, this is Jeff Demansky. I am the host for tonight's information session, and I am so glad to be joined by folks from the Saugerties Library and the facility committee, and I welcome everyone else who might show up. I am recording tonight's presentation, and it will be available afterwards to view as a video, and I'm happy to share the slides with anyone who might like to see them as well. And this is the overview of what we'll talk about. I'm going to talk about what is this program that the village of Saugerties and the village of Nelsonville and the town of Rhinebeck and the town of Gardiner are exploring right now. And the official name of this is, and that's, oh, I see your question. But the official name of this policy in New York State that empowered municipalities to act on behalf of all of their community members within their municipal borders is Community Choice Aggregation. And I will try not to use too many acronyms tonight, but Community Choice Aggregation, and I'll explain what that term means on the next slide or an upcoming slide. I will use the acronym of CCA, which is very common. And you can see in that next bullet, what are the benefits of CCA? So I'll talk about that, the reasons that the state allowed it, the reasons that cities and towns and villages are launching these programs or exploring launching these programs. And then the bullet, will it affect me? Will CCA affect me? Is on the assumption that the community moves forward to launch a CCA program. I'll go into detail about who's included within a community, who has a decision to make, and what those decisions are and who doesn't off the get-go. And this is a particularly relevant point because, as I'll describe, CCA is a program that offers access to a very excellent fixed and very competitive electricity rate. And it offers it as a new default option, replacing an existing state default with a new default option. So some folks are automatically included. So that's what that bullet refers to. But to really understand the program from the user perspective, I talk about it from the Central Hudson bill perspective. I'll share a couple of screenshots of my bill as a Central Hudson customer from here in Central Hudson territory, living in Beacon. And then on the assumption that the program moves forward, I'll describe what are the next steps for the program within the communities. And I'll finish out with some FAQs, some frequently asked questions, as a review of topics I've talked about, some common questions that are very commonly asked. And then I will definitely stop and leave time for questions. So there'll definitely be time for questions. All right, so moving on from my agenda, why are we here tonight? And that is because the village of Saugerties, as well as the town of Gardiner and the village of Nelsonville and the town of Rhinebeck, are all in the exploration phase of considering launching a clean energy program, joining a partnership that's called the Hudson Valley Community Power Partnership or program. And it would be these 4 communities joining these 10 communities that are currently in the partnership. 6 of these communities were the founding communities of the Hudson Valley Community Power Partnership starting back in 2019. That's the city of Beacon, the city of New Paltz, the village of Cold Spring and Phillipstown, the city of Poughkeepsie, and Marbletown, all the initial, and 4 other communities joined a little bit later. But this is a partnership program. As I've mentioned, Hudson Valley Community Power is a partnership. It is these communities and could potentially be these communities if they move forward to launch a program. And to get to this phase, all of these communities have done what the state requires. They've all passed a local law enabling them to potentially launch a community choice aggregation program. And a second step in the process is to choose for the exploration part of the effort, and if a program's launched, how will it be administered? Who would oversee the program? And that is the company that's in the lower right corner of the slide, Jewel Community Power, which is a division of Jewel Assets. And that is a private company based in Westchester. And that company was very instrumental in getting this policy enabled in the state. And they are a very forward-leaning company, and they are excited by this program and are working with dozens of communities around the state on this program as a vehicle that promotes more renewables on the New York State grid in a way that is not only cost effective, but actually can be a win-win scenario in that it can be less expensive to pay for renewable power generation sources for electricity than one might pay for predominantly non-renewable electricity source power, with the utility making that decision. So all of these communities passed a local law. All of them picked Jewel to be the administrator, and Jewel chose my nonprofit, Hudson Valley Energy, to be the program organizer in the Hudson Valley. So we are the ones that are doing education sessions like this, and we are there for the duration of programs when they launch to help people through the phone, by public meetings, office hours that we hold within the communities, ongoing resource support, which is great because it's a role we do more and more actually lately with the craziness that's been happening with Central Hudson. And so we've been answering lots of questions for folks, and it's a fun part of the program is that we in essence become a part of the community through this program, and we're there for the duration, which is a very important role to play because on the face of it, this is a relatively simple program, as I hope I'll explain, but energy choices and speaking energy, I found it's kind of a second language for everybody, including me. I mean, I continue to learn new things about the energy marketplace every day. So it's really nice for our nonprofit to be part of this, to be a resource to the communities and to help translate what's happening and what the opportunities are too, as we look forward in the direction that we need to go. All right, so that's the partnership explained. And as I said, we're here because these 4 communities are considering joining the partnership. And for us, images on the left are hydropower and wind power. Not shown there is solar, though there is sort of a depiction of the sun in our partnership logo. But again, this is a focus for us on a very cool program, a very cool policy in New York State that allows a win-win scenario in terms of cost of renewables, but also I'll preview that there's another important win in this trifecta of benefit that's offered by the program. So in some detail though, what is this generic policy called Community Choice Aggregation, or CCA? And before I jump into the bullets on the right, I'll just explain the term Community Choice Aggregation. The idea of the program is that communities, typically smaller communities, aggregate together to offer a choice around energy. And it can be used, I use a Swiss Army knife analogy many times, that there's many tools in a Swiss Army knife, and passing the local law is like getting the knife without taking any tools. It's giving yourself the ability to do some work with the tools in there, and which tools you take out is up to the communities to some degree. But the main tool that we're going to talk about tonight is this idea, in essence, of a buying club for electricity supply. This idea that the community can lead as a negotiator with power in the supply marketplace to offer all the members of the community a really good rate for electricity supply. So this energy purchase program, looking at the bullets on the right, was authorized by the New York State Public Service Commission in 2016. This concept of buying electricity supply or entering into an agreement for designating where your electricity is made and how to a degree how it's made and how much it costs is not new. It's much older than 2016, when the utility markets and the energy markets were deregulated in New York State and other states in the 1990s. That's when utility companies became delivery companies. They were taken out of the ability to be supply companies. They were not allowed to make money on supply. So it's surprising to some folks to learn and to understand that Central Hudson, Orange and Rockland, Con Edison, NYSEG, all of them, they are only allowed to make money as delivery companies. They own the infrastructure and do all the services to make sure that packages that they don't make are delivered reliably to the customers in their utility territory. The packages I'm talking about here are energy, electricity, and or gas. And to use an analogy, UPS FedEx, the Postal Service, these are delivery companies. And in essence, that's truly what the utility companies are, in that that's their focus of their business model. So, but this idea of choosing an alternative supply source was enabled back in the 1990s, and individual customers could do that ever since the 1990s. They could go out and enter into a contract with a private energy supply company, and I'll put up some names of these companies. You probably know some of them. There's dozens registered in New York, and they could, in that way, designate how much they're paying for electricity supply and/or how their power is made. What the state enabled in 2016, it gave the power to designate a new default source supplier to cities and towns and villages to act on behalf of their community members, to replace a default established by the state, which is talking about the third bullet here, with a local decision. So when deregulation went into effect and the utility companies were not allowed to make supply, it was other companies that were actually generating the power and serving as the middlemen to get it to the utility company's infrastructure to deliver to the customers. There had to be a default setting for every utility customer in terms of who is making that decision in this marketplace. And the existing state default is that the utility company will make that decision for their customer base without making money on it. It's a pass-through cost, but they will, as a state default, make that decision. And what happens through CCA is that default is replaced by the decision made by the aggregation of communities, community choice aggregation. And it works wonderfully in the win-win scenario because the aggregation is of sufficient size to attract competitive bidding by the suppliers. And so it just works basically on the typical marketplace. There's no subsidization of this to make it work. If and when it launches, this new default option operates as an opt-out program. It's offered to the majority of community members automatically, and they have to opt out if they don't want to be part of it. So that's the essence of how it works. That's why the suppliers can bid aggressively, because they know that they'll have a significant number of community members that are part of the program. And it is that secret sauce that allows it to operate that way. But it is something that is not something that excludes any of the other choices that community members have. Anybody could opt out at any time and take advantage of the original two decisions that they had available to them around supply choice. So what are we talking about with supply choice? This is a very simple graph shown on the right here, but to make the point about what we're talking about when we're talking about electricity supply, which is the focus of the program for the communities that we're working with. Electricity supply on your bill, and just generally, is something that by which you pay for the amount of electricity you use. It's a way to convert this rate, the amount of electricity you use, or kilowatt hours, into dollars. So the rate is some amount of money, cents typically, or it can be expressed in dollars, but dollars per kilowatt hour or cents per kilowatt hour. That is electricity supply, and that's what's on your utility bill. What is shown on the chart there is a simplified comparison of what the program offers in terms of the targeted intent. The red line bouncing up and down is the original default setting when the utility is making the supply choice for customers. By state mandate, utility companies, when they're making the supply choice, cannot fix the rate. They cannot forward hedge the rate to fix the rate. So they buy in the open marketplace. It's averaged out monthly. And so monthly, from one month to the next, the rate will be different. What is offered through a CCA program, if and when it launches, is a fixed rate. So the same rate every single month for the duration of the determined contract for the program, which has been typically 2 or 3 years. So it's a multi-year contract with the same rate every single month, and that's the flat green line. It's important to note that there is this idea that it's a very competitive rate, and we talk about how it can be, and we expect it to be very cost competitive and potentially cost savings versus buying it through the utility market, through the utility company decision. But importantly, note that the red line bouncing up and down, we very intentionally show that there are months when the red line is above the flat rate, and there are months when it's lower. So we'll come back to that, that concept, just to express that what we expect is that on average, this will be advantageous, but not every single month will be better than the utility rate. But again, this idea of a fixed rate though, and it's, the idea we're using a green line here is that it's a focus on a way to promote renewable generation, changing the proportion of renewables on the New York State grid through this program, through this fixed rate. So what does it actually look like on the bill? And so I've got a before and after of my actual utility bill. So this is my Central Hudson bill. And there's a number of very valuable insights to be gleaned by looking at the utility bill. We found that it's been really helpful to take people on a tour of the utility bill in a few ways. What a lot of people don't realize is that their utility bill that they receive every month is actually two bills in one. It's broken up into the two boxes that I have here, where there's the top box, the top red box, and then the middle red box. The top red box that is surrounding the electricity delivery charges. So it says right at the start in the green bar there that the total electricity delivered, is shown with all of these line items. So each of these line items have, beginning with the amount of electricity that a customer used in that particular month. And in this month, I used 573 kilowatt hours. So each line item is for a certain charge that goes into all of the delivery services that Central Hudson offers, which includes the infrastructure, the meter that I have on my house, the storm damage repair crews that are on the ready when there's repair work to be done, the customer service people they have, the billing services they do. It's all represented in those line items. And on each line item, there is the amount of usage, 573 kilowatt hours, multiplied by that middle column with lots of decimal pointed numbers, which is the rate. So that's the rate that for each line item, and that is in dollars per kilowatt hour. They don't show the symbols on it, but that is in dollars per kilowatt hour. And when you multiply the usage, the kilowatt hours, by the rates in the middle column of numbers, you come out with just dollars in the far right column. And then if you add up each of those lines, positive and or negative, and there's a bill credit in there, you get your total electricity delivery charges. What is shown in the next section is the supply charges section. So they separate out on the bill how the power is generated, where it's generated, and who generates it into this section here. And what's represented here is the condition when Central Hudson is making the supply decision for customers. And the clue to that is the three line items that are in the supply charges section. If Central Hudson or a utility company is making the decision for the customer on supply, again, as a pass-through cost, there are three line items, and that's how you know. Within there in the middle one is the market price, and then there's a supply charge attached to that and an adjustment. But those are the three line items, and it works the same way on each line. Some usage multiplied by a rate, yielding the total cost on each line, dollars added up for total supply charges. So supply different than delivery. And regardless of whether someone's in a CCA program or not, or in a private contract for supply, there is no impact on the delivery charges. So the utility company makes money on delivery regardless of any decision a customer makes on supply. And they don't make money on supply when they're making the decision for the customer. What I show down in the third section is a benefit that I derive on my bill for being a community solar customer. And that community solar, some of you may know, is a way that you can be a virtual owner of a portion of a field of solar that's in Central Hudson territory or in your utility territory. It is in many ways equivalent to a benefit that one could derive by actually having solar panels on their home or business or on their property. What I show here, without going into too much detail, is that the benefit associated with having a solar arrangement is down here in the payments and adjustments section. What I'm emphasizing there is that the solar benefits are different than supply. And this is commonly confused by folks. They think that if they have a community solar subscription or they have solar on their home or business, that is their supply decision. And it very much is not. I'm just going to keep it at that simple level for now. I'm happy to go into more detail on that later, but I emphasize this just to try to clear up some confusion and to, by doing so, emphasize that the supply decision offered through a CCA program is compatible with any solar decision that a customer might make. And so somebody could do both, have a solar system on their home or be a community solar subscriber and still take part in a CCA program. So what does it look like? What does a bill look like if somebody is in a community choice aggregation program, or do they have a private arrangement for a supplier? And it looks like this. If I just jump in here, you see the same number of line items, different amount of usage in the delivery section. I'm going back and forth, but the 3 line items in the supply charges section are replaced by just one single line item with additional information at the top of the supply charges section about the supply company that this customer, me in this case, was connected to. And this was the company that Beacon, where I live, was one of the partners in the Hudson Valley Community Power Partnership Program, was in agreement with from 2019 to 2021. And that's this bill period that I took this bill from was within that period. And so what is here is the same amount of usage that's shown in the delivery section, but on this line item, the rate right here, the 6.361 cents per kilowatt hour, or as shown here, $0.06361 per kilowatt hour. That is everything for the CCA supply program. That is absolutely everything. That's everything inclusive. There's no additional charges. There's no subscription fees. There's nothing else. If somebody participates in the program that the communities have basically crafted for their community members, what it means is that they get the same supply rate on their bill every single month for the duration of the contract that was determined, and it gets multiplied by their usage to determine their supply charges for the month, which Central Hudson receives the payment for the total bill, just like always, but Central Hudson will then take this $48.41 on this particular month, send it to Direct Energy, which is the company that we selected competitively, we had chosen competitively for that time period. And then Direct Energy has entered into agreement with renewable suppliers in New York State, all New York-based renewable suppliers, generators of power, and they distribute that portion of that money to them, so that I, as a homeowner, can say that on a New York grid-based level, my house is powered by renewable production from New York State sources, and that's how it works. And again, still, there's a difference here that, again, my community solar subscription is not interfering with the ability to take advantage of that program. All right. So this is an analogy to just revisit what I've talked about in terms of those supply decisions. I call this my menu slide, like a menu in a restaurant. And what I'm saying here is that there are 3 choices that are available to community members in a community choice aggregation community that they can choose in terms of their electricity supply choice. They can have the utility company make that choice. Anybody at any point in time could enter into a contract with their own private energy supply company, or an ESCO, commonly called an ESCO. Or if their community is doing CCA, they can go with a supplier that the community negotiated in partnership with other communities for the supply decision. And on the previous slide, that was Direct Energy for the 2019 to 2021 period. Before a program launches in a community, the community members have these two choices. So if and when CCA launches, a third choice is added. But before that period, before a CCA program launches, the first choice, where the utility company is making the choice for the customer, that has an asterisk on it to indicate that this is the original default decision determined by New York State. That if a customer does not say otherwise, if they make no decision about supply, that this is a default. If a program launches and a supplier is selected, everybody who's in, almost everybody, and I'll explain the exceptions, but almost everybody who's in this first situation is automatically put into the supply selection made by the partner community. Then this becomes a new default option, or the opt-out option, which anybody can reject at any time and take advantage of the other two decisions. All right, so that's just trying to lay out again what is being offered and how it's an additional option, but also logistically how it works in terms of these options. And again, anybody can reject the CCA option to take advantage of either the utility company making the decision or being in a third-party supplier, such as Green Mountain Energy or Ambit or Viridian or any of the other dozens of companies out there. So why are we doing this? What are the benefits? And this is to some degree redundant too. The idea is that it gives local power to the community leaders. They through home rule, they can take advantage of that and make a local selection of the default supplier for their community members, transitioning from a state decision and the utility making that decision with no input from any of the community members or the leaders. So it really does empower local decision making about supply choice. And by aggregating together, you get the second bullet, bulk buying benefits. It's just like a Costco or BJ's wholesale analogy applies here, that through the power of numbers, there is leverage in the supply marketplace. And so suppliers will bid competitively because they get a lot of demand for their supply. Another benefit, though, of the program is, focusing on the flat green line here, is that this eliminates price volatility through the long-term fixed rate. So it's actually very advantageous for many folks to know that for the duration of this program, that bouncy red line is replaced by a green line where you know exactly what the rate will be for every single month. Your bill will vary if you're not in a budget billing arrangement based on your usage, but the rate will always stay the same, and it doesn't turn variable at any point. It stays fixed in a transparent way for a fixed period of time that's known off the get-go. So transparency and simplicity is a very important element of the design of the program. The supply does not have to be 100% renewable, but for us, that's an important element of this, is that we do want this to be ability to transition to 100% renewable sourcing. The last bullet on this slide is the element around consumer protection. There are numerous elements baked into this program that are focused on protecting consumers from bad experiences. And many folks have experienced have had bad experiences in the private supply marketplace. And so this program bakes in an element of simplicity in rate and duration. There's no contract for any community member to take advantage of the program. The community leader, the community itself enters into the contract for the fixed rate, which gives it the ability of a true public benefit. So people can say yes or no to this program at any time. They can opt in or opt out at any time. And so I found that in our conversations, we often, as you heard me tonight, even focus on that the ability to have a cost-effective way to promote renewables, which I'll show you is working quite well. But I found that consumer protection elements, because there's been so much well-earned distrust in the energy supply marketplace, is often appreciated as the most important element of what this program offers. It's a way to have confidence to make decisions and to ease the decision-making by the community leaders vetting it on behalf of their community members to reap some advantages from the energy supply marketplace. So these 4 communities that we're talking about, joining these other 10 communities, are in no way alone in this exploration and in launching programs. These blue dots on this map of New York are indication that there's more than 150 communities that have passed local laws that are in process of looking to see if CCA makes sense. And more than 5 dozen, I think more than 60 communities are in active CCA programs, including the 16 that are here in the Hudson Valley that I'm supporting, which are circled here. The Hudson Valley Community Power Partnership, which I was talking about here in Central Hudson Territory, and then a partnership with 6 communities that are in Rockland County. And the name of that partnership is the Rockland Community Power Program. So how are the programs doing? So this is a rate comparison chart that we keep up on the Hudson Valley Energy site to show how the programs are doing since the contract starts. And there's a lot of colored lines here, a bit of a rainbow represented here, but let me walk you through what is shown on this chart. So the green flat line, as you probably have seen from previous slides, that's a hint that this is our 100% renewable New York State sourced electricity rate for this, what is for Rockland Community Power, a 2-year program, which started in November 2020. So the rate every single month is about 7.2 cents per kilowatt hour for 100% New York sourced renewables. The program also offered, because communities were interested in offering it, another fixed rate. So people could stay in the program and offer a fixed rate for a standard or a mix of sourcing that mirrors what the utility obtains on a monthly basis. So this is not 100% renewable, but it is a fixed rate offered at about 6.5 cents per kilowatt hour. But in all these communities, the 100% renewable is the default choice. And so that is the one that by far the vast majority of community members are offered and take advantage of for the duration of the program. The red line is an average that I calculated back near the start of this program of what a private individual customer could obtain for a comparable product to the 100% renewable fixed rate that's offered through the program. So if I was going out to enter into a contract with a third-party supply company and I was looking for 100% renewable for a fixed 2-year period, it would have cost me at this point in time, probably higher now, but back then over 9 cents per kilowatt hour. So here, the comparison to the red line to the green line is an apples to apples comparison of 100% renewable fixed rate options versus an individual versus being part of the aggregation. So that just shows you the power of the bulk buying purchasing program. The line that changes, these 2 lines, are the ones associated with Orange and Rockland. It's their monthly supply rate. The yellow line is the actual supply rate from month to month. The blue line is a running average of this yellow line. So it's a little smoother. And it's the one that's really nice to look at to make a comparison to see how the average utility supply rate over the duration of the program compared to our program rates. And you can see when the program started in November 2020, coincidentally, the utility rate was right about at our standard fixed rate, below our 100% renewable rate, but not by much, but it was down here. Over the trend of the period, all the way through April of 2022, and I need to add the latest, the May number in, which is actually right about where did I see it? It was about 10.4 cents, so right about here. But it's trended up, as demonstrated by the motion of the blue running average line. And the running average has climbed above both of our program rates to the point where it's well above, almost a full cent above our program rate. This means that people are paying less for 100% renewables than they would have paid for non-renewables through the utility decision. So that's the win-win scenario bearing out. The same is true in the current contract in the Hudson Valley Community Power Partnership, which is these 10 communities here. The lines are a little squished together because there was a huge jump in the utility rates in Central Hudson that many of you might know about in February of this year. It went all the way up to 22 cents per kilowatt hour, which skewed the graph and made my lines a little bit more compressed. But the same color coding applies to this graph as it did to the previous one. And jumping to the end, the running average, the blue line of the Central Hudson rate, is well above our 2 program rates, including our 100% renewable rates. And matter of fact, it's the blue running average line is even above what I had calculated the private market option would be. But again, that might be higher now. But this demonstrates that the win-win scenario is bearing out. Even before the crazy rate jump in January of this year, when it stayed pretty high. Even before that period, though, our program was doing very well in relatively normal expected utility rates. And even before the crazy jump, the trend was up. And that is the essence of how this program delivers benefits. The ability to fix a rate at the start of the program suggests that there would be a potential to beat the average utility rate with typical escalation that one would expect. All right, so that's how the programs are doing. Now, who is included? Now, on the assumption that these programs move to launch, that we put together a request for proposals and a supplier bids a rate that is satisfactory to the communities, and it launches, who would be included automatically? If you remember my menu slide, I said everyone in category 1, where the utility was making the supply choice, would automatically be included in the CCA program, except customers who are already contracted with a third party. So this first bullet under the exception is people in choice number 2 on the menu. So if somebody has a third party arrangement, like with Green Mountain Energy or Viridian, they're not kicked out of that arrangement when the program launches. They can stay in that, and they can run it to the duration of the contract, and they can renew it. They stay in the decision they've made for supply. It's only the people in the original state default that are transferred in automatically, except for larger customers. The second exception bullet is for, it's called demand customers that are billed based on large demand. They're not included automatically because they have a standing demand charge on their bill, and the associated rates can be better than our program rate, though they can join our program if they want to, and many have with the jump in utility rates. Also not included when a program launches are anyone who has a freeze or a block placed on their account. And so if somebody is skeptical of the program, maybe they've had a bad experience and they don't understand the difference with this program, this is a suggestion of something they can do to prevent being in the program. But also, a lot of folks have put freezes and blocks on their account because of bad experiences in the past. And so they are often surprised when they're not included when a program launches, but this would be the reason. And to join the program, they just need to remove that freeze or that block and then join the program. And then the last category of people who are not included in the original default are the fourth bullet, anyone who's in the home energy assistance program, the bill subsidy program that the state offers for certain income qualified folks. And that's because of the fluctuation compared to the flat fixed rate. Because it is not a guarantee that the program will save money, the state decided in the program design that folks who are in a bill pay subsidy program, because of the potential risk of it not being cost advantageous, to not be automatically included. But again, anybody could join at any time. But people are in that first category, except for these exceptions, automatically included unless they choose to opt out, which they can do at any time. So if we move forward on the timeline that we're anticipating, everyone that's in the eligible customer list, except for those exceptions, will receive what we call the welcome opt-out letter, which is sent from the municipality with the municipal seal on it, so it does not look like junk mail. And it says the details of the program and explains what and why it's being done and what the rates are and what the duration is and who the supplier is. It has an FAQ attached to it, which includes explanations of how people can opt out of the program. It even includes a prepaid envelope with a reply card to make it easy to opt out just by sending in that prepaid envelope. And it has the phone number of my helpline team where you can call us to opt out. It also has a link for a web form that you can use. Any one action is sufficient to opt out of the program. After the letters are sent, the second bullet talks about this 30-day opt-out period that we anticipate will be the fall of 2022, probably in the September timeframe. It's an opt-out period for folks who are in the original default category and don't want anything to change. They never want to be included in the program. So they have 30 days to take any one of the actions to not be included. But if they decide to try it for a day or 3 months or 6 months, they can opt out afterwards as well. This is not the only time that people can opt out. But those who stay in will have the default supply choice that the municipalities made put onto their bill. And then after the transition, the communication between the supplier and Central Hudson, it'll be in the fall also, probably about November timeframe, that the fixed program rate would be on the customer's bill, put onto the utility bill in that supply charges section. So I'm going to jump into the frequently asked questions. And again, I will stop and encourage folks to either send questions to the chat or to unmute and just ask me a question at the end. But I have a few slides of frequently asked questions. So maybe this will address the question you might have. But again, this is, forgive me for redundancy. Like this first question, does this program replace my utility company? What I emphasized with my Central Hudson bill, where I showed the delivery charges section, that's to emphasize the point that the role that Central Hudson and the other utility companies play is never displaced. So people hear that there's a municipal energy program that's going to offer this opt-out supply choice. People don't understand, and some people ask, are you replacing Central Hudson? And it's absolutely not the case. This is just a line item change on the supply charges section if you stay in the program. The second question, does this impact the reliability of my electric service? It absolutely does not. People ask this question because they hear about our focus on renewables, and they think that they'll be exclusively connected to or reliant on renewable production in the grid. As I described in the bill arrangement, when you stay in the program and you're taking advantage of the 100% renewable rate, your supply charges that you pay as part of your total bill are sent by Central Hudson to the supplier that we pick, who then sends it to renewable producers in New York State. Those producers are part of the whole New York State grid, as are other production sources as well. And that whole grid, that bathtub of electrons, if you will, is from where we all draw our electricity, our electrons to power our equipment. And that is overseen by Central Hudson to be reliable, and the New York Independent System Operator, sort of the watchdog over the whole New York grid. And they allow and watch the production sources on the New York grid to ensure that there is no interruption or minimum interruption in reliability, talking about storms and the like. So there is no physical change that would result in any interruption in reliability or decrease in reliability, nor is there a decrease in service. People often ask, like, does this upset Central Hudson that they would lower the priority of storm damage repair in our community? And again, emphasizing that there's no impact to the delivery charges section, they're agnostic. And so there's no lower prioritization by Central Hudson because of this program. Will the program save me money? Simply put, it's not guaranteed, but it is doing quite well in this last year plus because of the nature of the way the program's designed. What if I want to change my supply choice? It's a complete flexible option, structured to be consumer friendly. So anybody can change their supply choice at any time. They can do it themselves online with the enrollment change form, calling the helpline and speaking to my team to make a choice, meeting with us in person. There's never any charge to do so. There's no fees, there's nothing hidden in this. It's just a simple expression of interest, and you can take advantage of any element of the program or opt out of it. The last FAQ slide, do I have to stay in the program the entire time? If it's a 3-year contract, as it is in this latest round for the 10 communities, do you have to stay in the whole time? And I think I've said this too many times already, but no, anybody could opt out at any time, and there's no penalty or fees to do so. And people can opt back in at any time too. The second question, can I participate if I have my own solar panels or if I participate in community solar? And that's where I was trying to emphasize with the middle section of the bill and the bottom section, the payments and adjustments for the solar decisions. They are parallel. They are comparable, compatible. So you can do either or. But yes, if you have solar or community solar, you can still take advantage of the supply program through CCA. And the last question, what happens after the program ends? It's a multi-year contract. What happens after it ends? People often ask this question because experiencing private ESCO arrangements where they've been in a fixed rate, and then when some period ends, it turns variable. Nothing like that happens. This is a fixed rate for the fixed period. The municipalities can renew, go out with a request for proposals as part of an aggregation for a new fixed rate, or if they choose not to renew, everyone automatically goes back to the original default situation without having to take any action. So if this municipality says this has been great, we're not going to do it again, all their community members are brought right back to choice number one on the menu slide. And the utility company, Central Hudson, would make their supply choice for them. So it's designed to not be tricky or opaque. This is supposed to be just a very simple program. All right, so thank you for your patience in getting through the slides in my presentation. If you have more questions that you want to ask afterwards, this is contact information to reach me and the team. That's our helpline, the 859-9099 number. That's an email you can use, info@hudsonvalleycommunitypower.com. And the website also has lots of really good information and other FAQs, a lot more FAQs than I shared tonight. So that's my presentation for tonight. I'm just going to look to the chat window. Just right from the start, you guys said from the Saugerties Library that you're looking at this from the perspective of a nonprofit organization rather than a residence. And unless the library has a very large amount of electricity use, which it might, some libraries do, if it's a demand meter account, commercial institutional customers that are not significantly large customers with a demand meter are automatically included. So all of this that I said would apply most likely to the library as well. There might be a separate commercial rate, but it's very close to the residential rate. And in some cases, actually, the commercial rate can be better in the contracts that we've negotiated than even the residential rate. So it just remains to be seen. And we'll know what the rate is this summer when we go out to market. All right, so I do see another question. If you live in a village within a town that is doing this, how does that work? As you might remember me saying right from the get-go, one of the first steps, or the first step for launching and exploring and then potentially launching a program, is that a municipality with taxing authority, I didn't say this, but that's the kind of the crucial descriptor, but a municipality with taxing authority and its own decision-making body, they have to pass a local law to enable this program and go through the other steps, including this outreach and as part of the process for launching a community choice aggregation program. If a town has done it and the village has not, then the residents within the village would not be included in the town's program if and when it launches. And that was the case with the town of Saugerties, which launched a program in the fall of last year, and the village residents were not included. Who's included and who's not included? That is a Central Hudson decision. Central Hudson has basically the master information about who is in which decision in terms of supply, and they have a database of who lives within which municipality. And so they're the ones that ultimately pass along the list of eligible customers to the supplier that's selected to the program. So again, if a town has done it and a village has not, or the other way around, if a village has done it and the town has not, then those who are in the program in the community that has done it are included, and those who are in the other community are not. So it can be very confusing, but we survived when we launched the program in Saugerties last year. And it will be maybe, there'll be some confusion that we can address because the town of Saugerties rate is going to be different, maybe only marginally, but it'll be a different supply number than what the village gets when we go out, and if they launch this year. But we can explain that difference for folks, and it's something they can find themselves on the website. So let me know if that answered the question or not. If you have more questions, I'm happy to answer it. Please feel free to unmute to ask questions. I'm happy to answer them. I'm going to pause for a moment just to give you time. I'm getting good at awkward silences to give people time to ask. Thank you. I'm glad that answered your question. Yeah, I'm not sure. That shouldn't be the case. I thought, well, I guess it can be an overlap, sort of like living in New York City. And that question seems interesting if you pay taxes to the town. Yeah, I remember, when I lived in New York City, you paid city taxes and also state taxes to some degree. So I guess, yeah, I'm not exactly sure of the details within that. But it ultimately comes down to who has the singular taxing authority or the dominant taxing authority. To the question, to be clear, if you already have solar company, then you are automatically not enrolled. No, no, the opposite is true. You are enrolled if you have a solar company. Any solar arrangement that you have is not in conflict with the supply program, um, except in very few cases. I mean, there is one community solar company that I know of that has a different arrangement that's not just a financial transaction, that actually does have impact on the supply rate. But in more than 90% of all cases, and probably even more than that, if you have solar on your home or business, that's a net metering arrangement that does not interfere with your needing to pay for supply. And I can go into more detail on that if you'd like. But if you have also a community, or instead, if you have a community solar arrangement by which you are receiving a monetary benefit in return for being a subscriber to a community solar farm, that is really just a financial arrangement that is not related to how much electricity you use in a particular month. So the benefit from community solar is something separate from the usage on each month. Nearly every customer, I mean, 99.9% of customers still have to have a supply rate on their bill for usage that they have. Absolutely true for community solar customers, that it's basically, it is not a substitution for the supply rate on your bill. Question: if you are already in a third-party supplier, you will not get a letter, but what if you want to change? An excellent question. It's true. If you are in a third-party supply arrangement when the program launches, if and when it launches, you would not receive the letter. But and we do our best to get the word out to everybody so that everybody knows about it, including folks in the third parties who might want to join. And so if you do have a third-party arrangement, what we tell people is contact your third-party supplier. Make sure you understand the rate differences. If the program rate's better than your third-party supplier rate, you definitely would have interest in joining. But also we tell people to make sure that there's no penalties for ending that arrangement. It's typically only in the first 12 months of a private third-party arrangement that there might be an early termination fee or an exit fee, which is something our program never has. But if there's no reason, if there's no financial reason not to leave that arrangement, anybody can end a third-party arrangement when it makes sense to them at any point, and they can just contact us to join the program. They just need to have their Central Hudson account information, and we can put them into the program. All right, any other questions? I very much appreciate these questions being asked. And again, feel free to unmute if you have questions.
All right, give it a try.
Hello, this is Brian from the library.
Oh,
Yeah, what can I do for you?
Just going back to the dissecting our electric bill.
Yeah.
Currently at the library, I see a multiplier on the bill.
Aha.
I think ours is 40, and from what I've heard you tell us, we utilize about 10,000 kilowatts or more.
Yep.
Maybe sometimes 20.
Yep. And do you see the demand charge down below? That sounds like you absolutely have a demand meter on there. Do you see the demand charge?
Okay, fair enough. So currently Central Hudson has but residential and everybody else. For the
most part.
All right, did I hear you correctly that being that we're a quasi-governmental agency or a non-for-profit, if you will, is there a third classification? Is it, it's not a residential, it's not commercial, and does the community solar have a stratification of classifications? Like, are there different types of customers?
Well, just working backwards. Yeah, just working backwards too. You said the community solar. This is different than community solar when we're talking about this supply program. So just to make sure that, and I know it's so confusing because we have community in our name and it's supply, but just to make sure that community solar is something that's basically a financial arrangement where you are a virtual subscriber to a local solar farm.
Okay.
For our program, you're asking about the service class designations. I mean, the Public Service Commission defines the service classes for each utility that are automatically included: service class 1, service class 2. It basically breaks down to 3 classes, to simplify it to some degree. There is residential, there is a commercial class, and it's often based on just the designation of the company. You know, it could be an institution, it could be a private business. Municipal is considered commercial. And then there's large customers, which could be either residential and or could be commercial or
Right.
institutional. So the large customers, the library, as described, it sounds like you do have a demand meter, kind of fall into that third category of being a large customer,
Okay.
and would be excluded from automatic inclusion because you have the demand charge on the bill.
All right, that's one nuance, but how about when it comes to the kilowatt per hour charge?
So yeah, so if that's what I was gonna say. Now, if you wanted to join the program, the way it's currently structured with the town of Saugerties, for example, you would, and you would say, I want to be part of the program, even though I know I'm in this demand meter arrangement, right? I will never do away with the demand charge, but I want to go with the supply rate of your program. You would go with, if there is a distinction from the suppliers of a residential versus a commercial, you would go in as a commercial rate, which could be higher or lower than the residential. This is why I say energy is like a second language. It's all so up in the air. And I say that because in the 2019 to 2021 contract that we had with Direct Energy, it was the same rate for residential and commercial. So it was really simple. But in the Rockland Community Power program, which we launched in November of 2020, and in the new 3-year contract in Hudson Valley Community Power up here in Central Hudson, there are different residential and commercial rates. And I say it can be higher or lower because, forgive me for talking so much, but in the Rockland program, the residential rate is actually a little higher, slightly higher than the commercial rate. But in the Hudson Valley Community Program, which started in July of last year, the commercial rate is slightly higher than the residential rate. So it's the details are important in the letter that's received in terms of understanding. But the wonderful thing, if I can be self-gratifying here, is that my team's here to help and explain all that. You know, when we actually know the details, when we have the details in hand, if it's confusing at that point in time. That was more than you bargained for, right? Any other questions? I don't see any other questions in the chat window. I'm happy to stay. It is 8 o'clock. I'm happy to stay though. I'm in no rush. So feel free to ask more questions. But let me also say thank you so much for being here and for asking questions. And let me also say, I forgot my one ask of people, if you're still listening, just help me spread the word. You know, whatever we can do to let other people know about this, including having me come to speak to any groups that might have other meetings that I could come to. We often find that's the best way to get the word out, is to attend another organization's meeting, and we can do a 10-minute overview and answer questions. So feel free to reach out to us at any of these information ways, and let us know if there's anything we can do to help spread the word to the community, so that there is a least amount of surprise that we can engender when we launch, if and when we launch. All right, well, I'm going to say thank you. I'm not going to go away yet, but what I am going to do is just going to stop the recording.